Arena. I'm Lily, and welcome to my recurring segment on the channel, which is Lily talks about a format that no one really cares about, starring me, Lily. Today's topic, Historic Brawl. For those of you out of the loop, Historic is a game mode on Arena, which essentially just is everything on Arena. It is, at least starting out, Arena's non-rotating format. They have recently announced they want to get Pioneer on there eventually, but for the time being, we have Historic, which is essentially, right now it's Ixalan Forward plus 20 cards they added today, the day of recording. And yeah, so it's then you taking that Brawl, the standard commander format, and it's a mix between those two formats, where it's Historic Brawl, where it's essentially, it's like somewhere between, it's like closer to Brawl, so it's Brawl with everything you can do on Arena. I explained that in the most roundabout and succinct way possible. But essentially it's non-rotating Brawl with anything on Arena. It's essentially, it's kind of like Arena's replacement for Commander, because we don't really have Commander or anything close. It's much closer to Brawl than it is Commander. And I'm coming here with a deck tech, because while it isn't officially supported game mode within like the queues and stuff, you can direct challenge people with it. And the people over on the Discords, or this channel's Discord, link in the description below, there's lots of awesome people. You should check it out. We've been playing a lot of Historic Brawl and been having a lot of fun with it. So yeah, and I put up a poll on Twitter last week asking like what each of these decks, using some of the new stuff from from Historic Anthology 1, which came out today, do we want to do a video and brewing around doing a deck tech on? And here we are. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. And as you probably already know because you clicked on this video, that we're going to be doing a deck on the brand new commander that they added to, well, not brand new, but the new commander they added to Arena, which is Captain Sisay from Invasion. That's Invasion, right? That's definitely Invasion, and I'm gonna just go with that. I'm pretty sure it's Invasion, but I also feel like, or is it, no, that's not Torment. Torment's Spirally. It's Invasion. Yep. I know what I'm talking about. But, Captain Sisay. Honestly, long-standing commander in EDH, has a bit of reputation, but she's a 4-mana 2/2. You may tap her and search your library for legend or legendary card. Well, that's the old thing when legend was a creature type, not a super type like it is now. But essentially you search your library for any legendary. So you can search for legendary creatures, legendary artifacts, planeswalkers, since those are all legendary now. That's something that didn't actually happen before Ixalan. And you feel a card to put in your hand and then shuffle your library. So she is an incredibly powerful tutor and like card advantage engine as well, but she is very fragile. She has to stick around for a whole turn, and in EDH, like, there's a lot more ways around that. Like, there's boots you can put on her and start like shooting stuff right away, and she's also protected and stuff. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like you remove her, or she will kind of quickly get out of control because it just gives you not only card advantage but just repeatable tutoring effects that you really don't want your opponents to have. And the thing is that the main problem I think with her in Historic Brawl at the moment is twofold. One, you just don't have the tools to give her haste, especially in Selesnya, or protect her. There's no lightning greaves or swiftfoot boots to really get put on her, or like whispered silk cloaks. So you're kind of stuck with like, she's just gonna be vulnerable, and you kind of have to accept that. The second thing is, currently Historic Brawl is just 1v1, so you're going to be a lot more, like, it's a lot more targeted, which means that, not so much because it's like, yeah, in multiplayer if there's 3 people going to be targeting your Sisay because they absolutely should, but in 1v1, people in your decks are running more spot removal than they would normally, where generally, especially early on, especially if you're playing this out turn 3 or 4, your opponent is going to have spot removal, whereas in normal commander, you can usually, it's not as likely, they often will, but you can also politic it and do things like that, where it's like, okay, just let me activate Sisay once, and then you can remove it, and also never take that deal, ever, just saying, you should kill Sisay. But there's some politics you can get around, and there's tools you need to protect her that aren't necessarily in the cards, they just don't get on 1v1. And really, if you see a Sisay across the table from you, it is priority number 1 for the most part to get that off the battlefield as soon as possible. So, Sisay has some inherent problems, but some really cool inherent things. So it is at its core a legendary creature deck, where we're using her. We have lots of kind of like toolkit cards, but we also have some legendary synergies in there that we're working with as well. Notably, some things I didn't use. I was considering running Thran Temporal Gateway, but which is a 4-mana artifact, which you can pay 4 mana and tap it to put a store card from your hand into the battlefield at instant speed. And while it is interesting and it is cool, I found, especially with the legendaries available in Selesnya right now, it is just easier to, how do you say this? Just ramp into the things. You don't need to be cheating things into play. You're not like using Thran Temporal Gateway to like put an Emrakul into play. You're using it to put like a Zatalpa into play, and it's easier just to get to 8 mana. But first things first, there's a few things we're doing to essentially get around some of Sisay's initial weaknesses. Nope, first we're talking about lands. I know how I organize this. Very basically, because they're basics, running 6 forests and 5 plains. Nothing too special, mostly just because we have a fair number of like dual lands available to us, but it's like, we have to run some basics. It's a 2-color deck, so we'd be running lots of basics. Unless we're running 3+ color decks, you can get away with running not that many basics. You should still run some basics, like Assassin's Trophy and Field of Ruin is a thing, and I don't know how many people have just like straight up just like essentially strip mined with Field of Ruin. I'm just like, okay, I'm fine with that. Well, it's not even strip mine because it's like I get my land back, but they don't. You should run some basics. There's some utility to running a few of them, even if like Blood Moon isn't in the format. And then we're running essentially all the Selesnya dual lands that can tap for you on. So Blossoming Sands, Command Tower, because I mean obviously you're playing Commander and you're not playing a monocolor deck, so run Command Tower. Fable Passage, notably we're not running Evolving Wilds just because we didn't really need it, and it's slow, and late game it doesn't actually, the mana in this deck is very solid. We didn't really need the extra one, and I'd rather have all my lands tapped for both colors throughout the entire game. Selesnya Guildgate, Sunfeather Grove, and Temple Garden, and Tranquil Expanse. There's a fair few, but I mean, just like, it's the Selesnya dual lands, what do you do? In terms of utility lands, we're running Castle Ardenvale, just because, I mean, well, we're running both castles, just because you might as well, especially in 2-color, where it's like, the opportunity cost of running these is extremely low. And you know what, sometimes you just have leftover mana, especially if they have enough ramp you're doing, that, you know what, sometimes you just need jump blockers or another body in the field. It's honestly super minimal, but there isn't much reason not to run this over plains anyway. We're also using Castle Garenbrig, which will sometimes get you an extra mana for, like, I don't know, casting your, whatever, 6-drop a turn early or something. Next, we're running Field of Ruin, just because non-basic land hate is important. Like, there's the Ixalan flip lands, but more importantly, there is Field of the Dead, and you gotta have a way to deal with Field of the Dead, and that's important. And even then, like, it can have utility for like hitting things like a very like high concentration decks, like source if you can hit like a Niv Mizzet decks like Rupture Spire or like not Transguild Promenade. It's the Gateway Plaza. Is that it? Yeah, Gateway Plaza. Like that can like kind of mess up their mana a bit, because even though they get to find whatever they need necessarily, it doesn't get them all everything in that flexibility. But for the most part, you're running Field of Ruin to counter Field of the Dead, and with a 2-color deck, there's really not that much penalty for running Field of Ruin. Speaking of the devil, we're running Field of the Dead. In Historic, we have enough lands, different land sets, like, I think, not including, like, Fateful Passage, which doesn't really count, because it doesn't really count for your land type. We're running, like, 11 different basic lands, or not basic, but, like, 11 different land types, and, again, the opportunity cost isn't super high, and I feel that it is so good. Once you get it online, it changes how the game plays immensely, and just the value it gives, and making every land draw at least somewhat of a live draw is just fantastic in late game. Honestly, I've come around to it's like, honestly, if you're playing a 2-color deck in Historic Brawl, you should be running Field of the Dead, just because it's just that good. It is an incredibly powerful card. And in this slow format, there's no reason. Like, it's not like you're having to, like, even on the most stretched mana base, like, even if you're playing, like, 5-color, like, whatever, you should be running Field of the Dead, because it's just that good. Alright, now getting me the actual cards. The first couple are just mostly actually to get around some of Sisay's weaknesses. Currently, the only way in Celestia to give something haste is Crashing Drawbridge, and it's there just because, like, also it's like, it isn't also terrible just in the deck in general, because, I mean, even EDH, it's also a decent budget haste enabler, but sometimes you just play out a bunch of big legend stuff, you want to give them haste and, like, get that strike in and things like that, but it's mostly there for Sisay, so you can activate Sisay the turn she comes down. Notably, one thing is that if your opponent is representing a removal spell, do not activate this ability immediately. You're going to just wait as long as possible. So even if it's like to the end of your, because like likely you're not casting the thing that Sisay's doing anyway. Anyway, you should really wait the last minute that you're doing Sisay's thing, like just basic magic etiquette, not etiquette, but platitude. Just wait to the last minute that you can do something, because you want to give her haste in response to the removal spell, and honestly, if it gets to the full turn cycle and there's like still representing a removal spell, just let it come to your turn. Don't, so you can still get her activation in, because otherwise you're just not going to get an activation in. So if they're representing removal, yeah, like be careful about that. But if they're not, don't worry about it. Just like if just give her haste, tutor what you need, and yeah. And then later on, like giving like your big like Oketro or something haste has utility on its own. And next up, on the closest thing that we get to protect this thing. Fun fact: Veil of Summer is a good card, and blue and black are really, at least in my meta, are the two most played colors. Like Grixis and Sultai, I found Grixis, Sultai, and 5-color are like the strongest color types, and it's one of those things at the end of the day, yes, there are some matchups that it's just going to be a dead card in, but I'll be 100%. If you're not playing blue or black, and they're like, you're not playing blue and black, and I'll talk about that a bit later, but if your opponent's not playing blue or black, you honestly don't have that much to worry about, because you do not have a lot of the strong top end and just control and interaction stuff that you're really worried about, where you care about that instant speed removal and counter spells and things like that. And if they don't have that, your deck is well posed to fight that deck. This is to fight better decks, and that's where it is, where it's to protect Sisay against a removal spell, or helping our other spells resolve and stuff like that, and all the normal thing that Veil of Summer does, but I'm running it anyway just because it is so powerful against essentially most of the decks that matter in Historic Brawl. Granted, I would say that this is kind of a sequitur into something I wasn't meant to talk about, but one thing to talk about is within your group, and one thing that I think we've started to talk about on the server is not everyone necessarily wants to play like highly tuned, and not every player wants to be playing like top tier commanders and stuff, and kind of how you do in Commander where having different power levels, where it's just like, yes, if you want to win, you should just be running like Sultai or Grixis and they'll be good. But that said, if you don't even run those and you're running in a lower power level group where people are playing off-meta stuff, you don't need to be running this. I'm running this because right now, sometimes I just gotta beat Yasmin, okay? And of course I tested with her earlier tonight, and of course she pulls out Naya, so that was fun. And I drew it all 3 games against her. That felt good, but that said, I still do not regret having it in the deck. More often than not, I think it'll be useful. Alright, next up we're into the legends. These are the things that like Sisay can tutor for. Notably, there's some things that are in the removal section that she can tutor for there, but these are like the non-removal things that Sisay can tutor for. First up is Azor's Gateway. Now this one's interesting because you're like, okay, like it is essentially a 2-mana artifact that essentially lets you to pay 1 and loot, and you can eventually flip it and it produces a ton of mana, which is useful, but we're mostly using this as a loot stick. And I have this in here, like over something like Treasure Map, because A, you can grab it for some say, it's a bit flavorful, yada yada yada. But mostly, I like this to fetch for this in response to Sisay being removed, and you're not in a spot to play her again. Where it's like, if you just played her on 4 and maybe you have Haste or something, or it's like on 5, you're tapping her to fetch for something and like with a removal spell add her on the stack. Fetch for Azor's Gateway to filter out your next draws, because Sisay isn't going to be around to get you that card draw anyway. And Azor's Gateway just kind of like is to get that draw engine going, because while Sisay is an amazing card draw engine, Celestia isn't a great card draw color. Where, yes, there are things that can draw a lot of cards, and if you can get those engine pieces together, but it really needs that lubricant to really get those engines going, and this is that lubricant. Where it's just like sometimes you gotta filter away some lands you don't need and get to the stuff you actually want. And it just helps that, and it's kind of just something that for Sisay to grab when it's okay, I need to get my card advantage. Even though this is an advantage, it gives you that selection. Next up is Gideon Blackblade. This is mostly here just to have an early threat against opposing planeswalkers and so on, where usually they're not going to be able to kill this thing very early unless you're like spending like a Murder Strider, and honestly then you're perfectly happy. And it can go in and start like punching up like Okos or Teferis or whatever, and just like really just like keep their board fair. But also, like, eventually after, like, for a couple turns, you can just, like, cash it into exile something and you're perfectly fine with that. Where, you know, he's just a good value creature, and really you're not usually fetching for Gideon, just because there's better things they have set situation, and also it's cheaper than Sisay, so it's, like, not like you're, like, curving into Gideon from Sisay. But it's mostly just a creature for early on to just, like, punch down the board a bit, and, yeah. And then, like, late game also just, like, giving something like Oketra or something lifelink is beneficial. Speaking of which, we have Oketra. Oketra's just a very solid body. One thing to notice that with her, when she puts on the battlefield, be sure to not shuffle her away in case you want to, like, when you're tutoring, because you shuffle your deck a lot in this, this deck. But she's here just because she is an annoying body that's hard to get rid of, and this deck is running a lot of creatures, and eventually the 4/4s will be a sizable threat. And again, she's just like a nice big dumb body that is a legend, and that's kind of why she's here. Nissa, who shakes the world. You can kind of put her in the ramp section because she just produces a lot more mana. But fun fact, Nissa's very good. She provides a board state. She untaps when she gives you more mana. Your opponent has to deal with her, otherwise you will just, if you alter, like that's a lot more ramp, and honestly even keep her in line if you're not ramping her. You'll just overwhelm the board state, and also just give you so much more extra mana with like doubling all your forest mana. And yeah, no, it's it's Nissa. What can I say? Again, like, I'm not likely to tutor for her unless I'm like looking to like cast like a huge like Voracious Hydra or Kamal's Druidic Vow. But she's just there because it's like, it's Nissa. Honestly, in most screen decks, you should be running Nissa because Nissa is very good. Especially in a format where it's like getting to that those big mana plays are very important. Next up was one that's actually just a very good thing to grab, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if like starts being put in like commander Sisay list, which is just Questing Beast. I mean, it's Questing Beast. It's just a good body. It's getting in there with haste. It has pretty good evasion. It blocks great, and it pressures your opponent while also pressuring your planeswalkers. And really, it's everything that you kind of want from a creature that you can just like grab at your library. And yeah, but it's also one of those things where it's like, yes, it's not like there is a temptation to like be like, granted, the card pool isn't huge on Arena, that there aren't that many of those cards, to be like, okay, let's put all these very situationally useful cards, which like if you ever draw them naturally, you're kind of dead unless you happen to need them. That said, Questing Beast is an example of one where it's like, I don't really need an evasive threat or to pressure planeswalkers, but you're never really sad to draw a Questing Beast, assuming you're not like mana screwed or something. But Questing Beast, it's Questing Beast. Next we have Shalai, Voice of Plenty. She's there mostly just kind of like, this is kind of a weird one to be tutoring, because it's like, you kind of want Shalai if you know your opponent has a grip full of removal, but if they have a grip full of removal, they've probably already removed your Sisay. So it's this awkward point, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, your opponent doesn't have removal yet, but you know, they have lots of card draw, they might draw into it, you want to give an extra level of protection to Sisay, because this is one of the few ways to give like Sisay like semi-permanent hexproof, and you grab Shalai, it protects your team, and it's great because Shalai is just real solid. She's also an evasive threat in the air for pressuring opponent's planeswalkers, which is very important, especially in Selesnya, because we don't have access to things that just kill planeswalkers. We don't have Murderous Riders, or the other thing, or like Vraska's Contempt and things like that. So it's like we have to rely on our creatures for most of the time to actually hit planeswalkers. I mean, also our O-ring effects, but we don't. I don't like. I prefer my O-rings to be hitting their commanders, just because there isn't that risk of them getting blown up later, as opposed to their blockers, which if I ever like board wipe all my, like if I only do my own Urza's Ruinious Blast, oh no, I just gave them back their Teferi and their Oko and their Nissa, and now I'm going to die because I just gave them a bunch of extra stuff. I don't remember what I was talking about and how that relates to Shalai, but I got there eventually, so who knows? Hi, I'm Lily and very professional in my videos. Alright, next we have the Circle of Loyalty. This is a good one. Like, we're not really a knight deck, but it's one of those things where it's like, if we've been ramping a lot and we just want to mana sink, the Circle of Loyalty is just real solid. Also, it has the legendary clause, so it's like it does just a little bit of everything that we want. It just gives all our guys +1. It's not the most relevant thing, but we actually have a fair few Anthem effects in this deck, where it's like, eventually they start adding up, and like, even with a few number of creatures, it's still decent. Whenever I cast a legendary spell, I make a 2/2, which is a 3/3 with legendaries, with, the Circle of Loyalty, so it's like, combos with most of our deck, because our deck is a lot of legends. And then finally, we can just pay 4 tap it to make it 3/3. Well, it's a 2/2, but it's 3/3 of Circle of Loyalty. So it's like, it's great if we know we're like, could be, if we like we're holding on to like a Mox Amber or something like that, or other cheap legends, and if we just have like a lot of mana that we just want to just start dumping into guys, it's there, and it has an Anthem stapled onto it, so it just does a lot of things that this deck really wants to do. Heading out from Ardenvale into Garenbrig, we have the Great Henge, which really, this is just one of our card advantage engines. And it's one of those things where it's like, I like, if I have already a big creature on the battlefield, and so it's kind of cheap, so I can like play this and also play into something else, and I know I have other creatures to follow up on, or if I'm at low life and I know I want to keep start getting that 2 life every turn, it's one of those things that can help you stabilize and refill your hand when you're kind of moving into the mid game, which is something that Selesnya can have a little bit of a difficult time doing. But yeah, no, and it's like, because we are more of a Legends focused Selesnya deck rather than kind of like a go wide that a lot of the other Selesnya Legends in the format are right now, we can take advantage of this a lot better. Just because Legends generally are kind of biggish to some extent, whereas when our biggest thing is our like 2/1 Knight of Autumn, it isn't necessarily as useful. Next up, one of like the most powerful things to be able to fetch when you need it, the Immortal Sun. 6-mana artifact, and honestly, it has a lot of text that is very nice, but this is mostly to shut down an opponent, honestly, with a Planeswalker commander. Like, some of them are obviously still a little bit of annoying to deal with, like that have passives that are nice, but if your opponent is like playing like Nicol Bolas, you play Immortal Sun and that really puts a damper on their game plan. Just because they have a hard time dealing with artifacts, and outside of like stealing it, and even the steal that doesn't, like, obviously it's not good for them because they're drawing an extra card, but it does like it just can really ruin their whole game plan. And obviously the extra card and the extra, like, the Anthem and causing your spells to cost less are all nice benefits, but you're most doing it being like, okay, let's grab like a very permanent Planeswalker solution out of our deck whenever we need it. And it is an awkward one because this deck is also running many Planeswalkers, and it'll also shut down our own Planeswalkers. But in the end of the day, the utility of having this is just so nice, because it's like we're not relying on our Planeswalkers, they're just here to help supplement our main plan, which is mostly just whittling our opponent down with essentially big beaters that are legendaries. And finally, in this category, we have Tristani Discordant, which actually, for once, this isn't here necessarily for the Anthem, or the fact that it makes 2 guys. Those things are icing on the cake, but it's mostly a counter to 2 of the most powerful cards in the format: Mass Manipulation and Agent of Treachery. Those 2 are just alone, it's one of the reasons why it's like I really don't like not running blue, because it's like those are 2 of the most powerful and swingy cards in the format that can really make or break games, be able to steal your opponent's commander or whatever, thing like that. And the fact that we're not doing those sort of shenanigans lets us just safely be like, okay, let's homeward path every turn and get everything back that's on our side, and kind of really doing what we can to fight against the best toys and the colors of, like, the best colors in the format are trying to do, and kind of directly countering them. And with Sisay, we can grab that effect when we need it. After they cast their Mass Manipulation or hit their Agent of Treachery, we can get everything back on our side and be very happy about it. Also command the Dread Horde, Entrancing Melody, Hostage Taker. The list goes on, and the number of things that this adds, this helps correct. Also, it's the best Disc Girls. I mean, there's that too. She's also the Guild Master of Selesnya and Selesnya Spasnia and all that, but it's just nice that that last line of text is the thing that's important in deck for once, not the first 2 that are generally a bit more relevant. And she's also just a incidental Anthem stapled onto her. But yeah, no, there's like 3 different Anthems in the deck, like 4 if you count Great Henge, even though it's not retroactive. But yeah. Alright, so one thing you might notice is that, Lily, these legends are nice, but they're all very expensive, and that's a very high curve. What's the lower part of your curve? And my answer to that is a lot of ramp. We are running 11 ramp sources in this deck, which is honestly more than I run in most of my commander decks. Most are 100 cards. But we just really need to go over the top of our opponents. We just need to like get there, get high, and start dumping our hands. Especially with the card advantage that we do start seeing of Sisay, is that we want to start like both playing our draws and what we're doing of Sisay, and having lots of mana. Honestly, mana is what wins historic games, like more historic brawler games, more than anything else. It's just having mana and having the resources to draw cards and dump your hand out. Not necessarily dump your hand out, but like having the resources to do what you need to do to win the game. That's very broad, but it comes down to mana. First off, we're running Arcane Signet. 2 mana rocks are also very important for us because we have a 4 mana commander, and a 2 mana, like one thing that 3 mana rocks don't do is get our commander out on turn 3, whereas 2 mana rocks do. And we're running both that we have. So we have Arcane Signet, which just, of course, unless you're playing a colorless commander, you should probably be running Arcane Signet. It's a good card. Running Beanstalk Giant, which is just kind of we're mostly using this as a 3 mana, like, rampant growth, but at the end of the day, like, it will just give us some, extra stuff there. Unfortunately, there isn't quite as much land ramp as I'd like. Honestly, one thing I'm considering running is just running Thunderherd Migration in this as well, over some of like the other rocks, just because with Urza's Ruinious Blast, which I haven't gotten to yet, blowing up our own rocks is awkward, but we just don't have that much of a choice with the current field of cards. This is more of a later ramp card, but Cavalier of Thorns. It's a 5 mana 5/6 of reach, and it's kind of like a super elvish rejuvenator. When you look at the top 5, you put a land card from among the lands battlefield and the rest in your graveyard. And when it dies, you can recur something on top of your library. But this is mostly, it is kind of like this like stage 2 ramp where we've ramped, we play this, ramp some more, and also just like have a relevant body to pressure whatever opponent's doing, and also just like this thing locks down the board, and that's kind of its purpose. Where it's kind of twofold, both it rams, but it also is this incidental just good board presence, and it's just a good card. Chromatic Lantern, it's not super important, but because we're only 2 color, but it's nice just to have our flexibility in our lands, and what do you do? There's not that many 3 mana rocks. Circuitous Root, it ramps twice, and it's land ramp, which I prefer vastly. Gilded Goose, again, just to get Sisay as fast as possible, because the faster you get Sisay out, the less likely she is to get removed, and that's really just where you want to be. Likewise, Llanowar Elves, just because getting that early ramp out, and that early explosiveness. It's one of those things where it's like, you don't really like running like mana dorks and like EDH, just because it's like board wipes there's lots of board wipes and you're likely you might lose them. But in Historic Brawl, the number of board wipes is much lower because more people are relying on spot removal, and yeah, they can still bolt the bird, but at least they're being removal magnets for the things that you actually care about. So yeah. New addition with Historic Mythology 1, which is Mind Stone, which is just a really good mana rock, and again, it's the other 2 mana rock that we have, and yeah. Running Mox Amber, just because we are running a lot of legends, and unless the board got wiped just that turn, this will usually be online. It doesn't really help us get our commander out, but it's just another rock, and it's another rock that survives Urza's Ruinious Blast. And finally, we're running Paradise Druid, because just like when it comes to mana works, like it's another 2 mana ramp, which helps because that's Sisay out turn 3, and it is also resistant to removal. And now finally, then we have Celestia Locket, just because 2 mana ramp, or 3 mana, we want the ramp, even though it's 3 mana, and yeah. Alright, so off of the ramp, now we're just on to our interaction. because interaction is extremely important in Historic Brawl, because you cannot let your opponent just do whatever they want. You need to disrupt what they're doing. Unfortunately, this is why playing blue or black is so much more important, because their interaction is so much better. Like, white is like kind of like known for its interaction and whatnot, but like white's interaction in Historic on Arena isn't very good. Like, most of its interaction is like sorcery speed, O-ring effects. And that's like, we don't have path, we don't have swords, we don't have like all like deck and stone even. We don't have a lot of the good things that white is known for removal. So we do with what we can. First up we have Cavalier of Dawn. This mostly will just hit any non-land permanent, and for the most part giving our opponent a 3-3 is not the end of the world. If the last few months of Standard have taught you anything, giving your opponent 3-3 to get rid of turning his opponent's thing into a 3-3 is in fact a good deal most of the time. Thanks, Oko. Its fly effect returning an artifact or enchantment is usually not super relevant, but you know, sometimes if like one got in the graveyard after like a board wipe or something or removal, yeah, sure, maybe it would do it, but we're mostly using it for its EDB effect. And it's a decent body. Conclave Tribunal, like, there's a few, I'm running a few of these O-ring effects, but they're mostly to hit our opponent's commander, just because we don't really want to be, like I talked about this briefly before, but we don't really want to be running, we don't want to be hitting, like, their other stuff with this, just because they can get removed, and you don't want, like, retroactively counterable removal, especially since people are usually running a lot of those kind of effects. I mean, granted, if your opponent's running Grixis, okay, that isn't much of an issue, but if they're running white or like green or like running Soul Dye or something, it is a problem that you do have to worry about. Or even if you're like wiping our own stuff, that's a really awkward position. We don't want to be like, okay, we need a Wrath, but if we Wrath of Urza's Ruinious Blast, they also get back some stuff of theirs. So this is mostly there as commander removal, because we'll go back to command zone and this will just be sitting there on the battlefield doing nothing. But yeah. Next we're running Night of Autumn, which is mostly just kind of running there. It has a flexible reclamation sage that sometimes the life is relevant or sometimes you need a body, but usually we just want to naturalize something. Luminous Bonds. Like, this is kind of my replacement for an O-ring effects for white, just because it's like white is very starved for removal, and it's not great, but it does. I'm considering disposing Luminous Bonds from Trapped in the Tower because it prevents activated abilities, but it's mostly there just because, like, in the case of just like everything getting destroyed on the battlefield, the creature that Bonds is connected to is also going to be destroyed, like outside of like a Cleansing Nova on artifact enchantments. But there's not much you can do about that. That would also still affect the O-ring. Yeah, like sometimes you just gotta stop some big thing from being a problem, and it feels weird, it feels draft chaffy, but it gets the job done. And honestly, for a lot of commanders like Niv Mizzet, like this does a great job, because it's like, honestly, the Niv Mizzet player kind of wants Niv Mizzet to die, because they get to recast and draw some more cards. You Luminous Bonds it, they have to figure out a way to kill it itself, or like to actually like get their Niv Mizzet back, to sacrifice it and recast it, and that's kind of where we want to be. Granted, it doesn't work against your opponents playing Planeswalkers or things that have passives that are more important. Like, it's not really effective against, it's like not super effective against like Golos or something, but white removal is not good and you need that interaction. One cheaper, pacifism, or running both. We're running Prison Realm as just a second O-ring. This is just same thing as Conclave Tribunal. We're mostly using this to hit opponents' commanders, although in a pinch we can grab something else that we need to just remove from the board. Running Settle the Wreckage, just because as kind of a situational thing up against both aggro decks and kind of more control decks. Settle the Wreckage is a little bit awkward than it is in Standard, because giving our opponent lots of mana is like, back when it was in Standard, like, okay, you gave your opponent lots of mana, most decks aren't going to have a good way to use that mana. Unless you're playing Celestia, and then you can Martial Multitudes for a ton. Woo! I miss Celestia tokens being somewhat viable. but that's beside the point. But your opponent has a little bit more things to do with, but the fact that it exiles, it is a one-sided board wipe. Yeah, it's just kind of there, because, like, sometimes you just got to do it, and, like, it isn't the best, because, like, oftentimes we'll be holding things back, but, again, the removal suite for white and, like, for white-green is not great right now. Speaking of one of our best removal cards, it's Ugin. A not green or white card, but this is tutorable, and it is card advantage, and it creates bodies, and it destroys any permanent that isn't like a Golos. So it is a little bit of everything. It tutors, and yeah, honestly, Ugin fits into most historic Brawl decks. And Brawl decks. Ugin is just all around a pretty good card. But it's one of a few ways to actually just destroy permanents. I've mentioned this like 5 times now, but this is a good card. This is Urza's Ruinious Blast. It's a legendary sorcery, which means that we must have a legendary creature planeswalker, which this deck does not have a hard time doing it. But it exiles all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. Also does rad art. Yeah. So it's not quite a one-sided board wipe because it will hit our mana rocks and like some other random like utility creatures we're running, but for the most part it will leave us with a much more like, it's not a full board wipe because your opponent won't be able to keep like any planeswalkers or like commanders they have, but it is a board wipe that more often than not is overwhelmingly in our favor, and it is one of the great big payoffs for playing a legendary deck. I mean, besides like Sisay being able to tutor for it. And yeah, like it's the fact that it's also exile prevents like any sort of like reanimation shenanigans or things like that, and it's just like overall it's just like fantastic. Next we have Vivian Reed, which is, we're mostly using Vivian as we can tutor her to remove artifacts, enchantments, and flyers, and yep, that's what we're doing. And she has pretty decent like card advantage. Like this isn't quite like a super creature and land heavy deck where her +1 I will find it does with like more art than I'd like, but you know what? She's just a real solid green planeswalker, and I can't really say no to just sometimes you just gotta kill. I get a naturalize effects, or what's that card? Is it Return to Earth that like is essentially her -3? I think so. But it just grabs it and works real solidly. And finally in the removal camp we have Voracious Hydra, because we're running a lot of ramp, and Voracious Hydra will sometimes just kill a creature and leave a body behind. Not much to say, it's just a good card. And finally we're just kind of into the last few other cards. And one of those is Kamal's Druidic Vow, which is an interesting little card, which is X green for a legendary sorcery. Look at the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of lands and or legendary permanent cards with a mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest in the graveyard. This is the other big legendary payoff, because A, we're running lots of legendaries, as you've noticed, and B, we are ramping a ton. So honestly, most of the times, like, if you're casting, it's like, it's not hard to cast this for 7+. And typically I'd like to wait till I can cast it for about 6. But even then, you're just like, it's just an instant board state. It's the closest you're gonna get to anything like resembling like Collecting Company or something. And the fact that it just also just ramps you at the same time is just fantastic. It's one of those cards where it's like, this is one of those good like late games. Okay, let's close out the game. Show me the board wipe opponent or I win. And yeah, and it's just one of those great payoffs for all the ramp, as well as these legendary sorceries. They are tutorable. I forgot to mention that Urza's Ruinious Blast. They're legendary sorceries. That is a board wipe that is tutorable by our commander, and honestly, it's one of the things I've tutored the most for with Captain Sisay. But this is also one of those ones where it's like, okay, I've ramped a ton, Sis is out, let's tutor for our big play to secure the win. And yeah. It's one of those things I'm kind of sad about because it's like legendary sorceries do not go over well from Dominaria, so they're not likely to come back. People were just confused and generally underwhelmed by them, but I just love the utility of them within this sort of deck. But yeah. And then finally, just a few little like smooth out stuff. Once Upon a Time, because we're a green deck, Once Upon a Time is a really good card. And finally, Scapeshift, because we're running Fill of the Dead, and if you're running green and Fill of the Dead, there is no reason not to be running Scapeshift combo. It doesn't really fit the theme of the deck, but it's just good, and you can just throw it in there and not worry about it if you have like 10 plus different 10 plus land types. Don't be like that opponent I played earlier this week on like Wednesday Brawl, who was playing mono green Dorvo and was running Fill of the Dead. It was just Fill of the Dead in a bunch of forests. Be sure to read Fill of the Dead before you put in your deck. It's a good card, but you have to make sure that you can get it online. But if you can get it online, also Scapeshift can make it sure, like, sure, it's like if you have like half the land types out you need, you can't really necessarily sacrifice your whole board. But even if Scapeshift is 2 over Fill of the Dead and the lands needed to get Fill of the Dead online, that's solid, even if it only gets you like 4 zombies and you're not getting like the 20 power that you can sometimes get from it otherwise. So it's just like, even at like low cost, you're usually getting your fair share of zombies out of Scapeshift. So, yeah. That's about all I have to say. And that's the deck. So, just, oops, you can see some of my stuff. Unrelated, check out my awesome new Skyrim character. Isn't that stealthy? It's so stealthy. I was having a bit too much fun with the custom color selection from the mods I was using. It's hideous. I did not mean to show you that, but you got to see a sneak peek into my Discord conversations on the secret servers. But yeah. Closing thoughts that we were. So like overall, I think the deck's a lot of fun. And I think it's a fun deck for like a step below kind of like the, okay, we're playing top tier like Historic Brawl decks, as kind of like not playing like Bolus and Yarok and Golos and whatnot. And what was I saying? So it's one of those things where if you're playing that step below, it's actually a lot of fun to play because it has like a lot of interactions. It's big, it's splashy, it's a great kind of like Johnny deck if you just want to play big stuff and like have that like cool like, okay, we're actually gonna like assemble all of our legends together and like smash face. It's great for that. And Sisay's really cool, but if you're playing against people who are playing those very control decks that really kind of dominate the format, you really want to be playing, you don't want to be running Sisay. Because the thing is, it really comes down to this, this deck's performance really comes down to kind of one question. Can your opponent remove Sisay the turn she comes down? Because if they can consistently, this deck will run out of gas and kind of fizzle out. The fact that you can't really protect Sisay, the fact that she is so vulnerable and such a removal magnet is a big problem for the deck. And if they can't answer it, she just runs away with card advantage and card selection that you're just not going to be able to, like, your opponent will quickly get buried with the amount of advantage, even if you activate her only once or twice. It's kind of one of those things where it's back in standard when Mono Blue was a thing. If like Mono Blue got 1 hit in with Curious Obsession, okay, you're not doing great. If they got 2 in, you've lost the game. And Sisay's kind of that where if you leave her unchecked, she will run away with the game. But honestly, that's true for a lot of decks. So it's like, okay. I mean, you could say that like if Yarok stays unchecked, it'll run away with the game. If you leave a Bolus unchecked, it will run away with the game. But the thing is that the problem with Sisay is her colors, where she will run away with the game, but she also doesn't stop your opponents from running winning the game that well if they answer her. So just because of how weak white is when it comes to removal and dealing with those threats, you just can't deal with it. So honestly, I think if you are playing in a meta that is dealing with those sort of decks leveled and stuff like that, I would highly recommend not running Sisay if you want to run kind of a Legends deck, and run Kethis instead. Because making the deck Abzan and getting access to black removal to be able to kill planeswalkers, so to kill creatures more efficiently, is just so fantastically better than running Selesnya. You know what I say, Selesnya is bestnya, but maybe not so much for the current card pool. It's just, it needs some stuff to really make it shine. And yeah, the lack of blue or black is a real problem for the deck. But that said, for the lower power levels, it's a lot of fun and I really enjoy it. But yeah. So let me know, what do you think? Like, would you mention more Historic Brawl decks? Because I build a lot of them. We play a lot of them on the Discord. So if you want to also play this format, check out the Discord. We have lots of cool people. But yeah. Well, I'd like to talk to you about, well, I'd like to talk to you about later. I am going to. I'm not leaving up the chance where I'll make another video. I guess I am. Like, I could just randomly, just like, you know, fall down a well and perish between the time I make the next video. But, I don't think that's likely to happen. I hope. But I hope you all have a wonderful night and wonderful dreams. Oh, and also let me know, if you do like this video, are there any commanders you'd like to see me, like, do another deck tech of? Because I like brewing this space, because it's like, I don't know, it's one that's like, it's still a card pool that's like, it's small enough that I feel like I have a pretty good mastery of the card pool, but it's large enough that it isn't as straightforward as just Brawl. So yeah, but that aside, I hope you have a wonderful night. And as always, may your story smile upon you.